The forbidden section of the Grand Archive smelled like dust and forgotten things. Lyra ran her 4 blue hands across the ancient texts, each page older than most civilizations in the Concordat. She was not supposed to be here. Archivists of her rank had no business touching relics from the precursor era. But Lyra had never been good at following rules when curiosity called. She opened a crumbling book and read the faded words aloud. The humans walked among us. They were small and soft, with only 2 arms and fragile skin. Yet they carried fire in their hearts that could warm a dying world or burn an empire to ash. Lyra turned another page. They healed the sick with their own blood. They built cities for species not their own. And when threatened, they became something else entirely. Something that made even the Void Walkers flee. Still reading those fairy tales. Lyra jumped, nearly dropping the book. Elder Oswin stood in the doorway, his aged blue face showing disapproval. He was her mentor, the greatest scholar on Salith, and he had no patience for what he called mythological nonsense. The precursors wrote about them extensively, Lyra said. Thousands of texts, Elder. Why would they invent an entire species? Oswin walked closer, his old bones creaking. To teach moral lessons. The humans were a story meant to show young species what to become and what to avoid. A contradiction made flesh. Impossibly kind. Impossibly violent. No real species could be both. But the descriptions are so detailed. Their biology, their culture, they're enough. Oswin took the book from her hands. You have real work to do. The Kalani delegation arrives tomorrow, and the council needs historical records prepared. Lyra wanted to argue, but the look in Oswin's eyes stopped her. She bowed her head and followed him out of the forbidden section. The door sealed behind them with a sound like a tomb closing. That night, Lyra sat in her small quarters, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about the texts, about the humans, about the one passage that haunted her most. When the endless hunger comes, the sleeping giants shall wake. Her communication screen flickered to life. An emergency broadcast. Lyra sat up, her 4 hands suddenly cold. The face of High Counselor Marin appeared, and Lyra had never seen such fear on anyone before. Citizens of the Concordat. 12 hours ago, the Devourer swarm breached our outer rim defenses. The Kalani homeworld has fallen. For billion souls, lost in 17 hours. The swarm is moving toward the core systems. All military personnel are ordered to report immediately. May the ancestors protect us. The screen went dark. Lyra sat frozen. The Devourer swarm. Every child in the Concordat knew the stories. A living plague that moved between stars, consuming everything organic. They had appeared at the galaxy's edge 50 years ago, slowly eating their way inward. Every attempt to stop them had failed. Every weapon, every alliance, every desperate plan. The swarm simply adapted and continued feeding. And now they had reached the core that Lyra's mind raced. She thought of the ancient texts. The endless hunger. Could it be? Could the precursors have known this was coming? She ran through the empty streets of the archive district, ignoring the alarms and the panicked crowds. She burst into the council chamber, where military leaders and politicians shouted at each other in terror. The humans, Lyra screamed. The texts speak of this. The sleeping giants were supposed to wake when, remove this fool, someone shouted. Guards grabbed her arms. Lyra struggled, trying to make them understand. The precursors knew. They wrote about beings who would save us. We just have to find them. We have to. A guard struck her across the face. Lyra fell silent, tasting blood. Oswin appeared through the crowd. He looked at her with something like pity, something like shame. Take her home, he told the guards. She is overcome with fear. We all are. They dragged her out. Behind her, the council returned to their useless planning. 30 ships against millions of swarm vessels. It was not a battle. It was a funeral. In the days that followed, Lyra watched the news feeds like everyone else. She saw the swarm approaching. She saw the Concordat fleet taking position for their final stand. She saw her people preparing to die. And then, on the 7th day, the sensors detected something. Ships. Emerging from the void regions, where no living thing had ever survived. Ships so large they made Concordat vessels look like insects. They broadcast a message that took hours to translate. When the words finally appeared on every screen across the Concordat, Lyra fell to her knees and wept. We received your distress calls. We are coming. The signature at the bottom of the message was a simple symbol, a blue and green circle, a planet covered in water and life. Earth, the humans were real, and they had finally woken up. Fleet Commander Boren had prepared himself to die. His reptilian scales had grown pale from stress, and his claws left marks on the arms of his command chair. 30 ships. That was all the Concordat could spare for this final defense. 30 ships against a swarm that numbered in the millions. Through the viewport, he could see them coming. The Devourer vessels moved like a living cloud, dark and endless, blocking out the stars. They made no sound in the vacuum, but Boren imagined he could hear them anyway. A hungry whisper that said, "We are coming. We are always coming." "Commander," his sensor officer called out. "New contacts. Bearing 725. Distance, impossible." "What do you mean, impossible?" "They are emerging from the void regions, sir." Boren's blood went cold. Nothing lived in the void regions. Nothing could. The radiation alone would cook any organic being in minutes. Even the swarm avoided those dead spaces. On screen, the main display flickered, and Boren forgot how to breathe. Ships. But not like any ships he had ever seen. They were massive, each one larger than Concordat space stations. Their hulls were scarred and ancient, covered in symbols that meant nothing to him. They moved with a purpose that seemed almost angry. "They are broadcasting," the communications officer said. "Translation is difficult. The language does not exist in our database. Run it through the historical archives," Boren ordered. "Every language we have ever recorded." Minutes passed. The unknown ships drew closer, ignoring the Concordat fleet entirely. They were heading straight for the swarm. "Match found," the communications officer whispered. "The language is, it is precursor era." From the forbidden texts. The message appeared on screen. "We received your distress calls. We are coming." "Orders, Commander?" his second asked. "Do we engage?" Boren watched the unknown ships. Part of him wanted to fire on them. Another threat was the last thing his people needed. But something in his soldier's heart told him to wait. These vessels did not move like predators hunting prey. They moved like protectors rushing to defend their young. "Hold position," Boren said. "Let them pass. And pray they are what I think they are." The unknown fleet reached the swarm, and what followed would haunt Boren's dreams for the rest of his life. The newcomers fought like nothing he had ever witnessed. Their weapons tore through swarm vessels as if they were made of paper. When one ship took damage, 3 others would move to shield it, forming protective formations that cost them dearly but saved their wounded. They did not fight like the Concordat, with careful tactics and self-preservation. They fought like family members defending each other to the death. 6 hours. In 6 hours, the unknown fleet destroyed more swarm vessels than the entire Concordat military had in 50 years. The living cloud broke apart, scattering in every direction. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourer swarm fled. The unknown fleet did not pursue. Instead, a small shuttle detached from the largest vessel and approached Boren's ship. "They are requesting permission to dock," the communications officer said. Boren stood. His legs felt weak. "Granted. And get every armed soldier we have to the docking bay." He met the shuttle himself, surrounded by 50 of his best warriors. The bay doors opened, and a cold mist spilled out. Boren raised his weapon, ready for anything. Anything except what he saw. They were small. Much smaller than any Concordat species. They walked on 2 legs, with 2 arms, and skin that looked soft enough to tear with a gentle touch. Their eyes were round and wet, and their hands had 5 delicate fingers. They matched every description from the ancient texts. Every impossible detail. The one in front was female, with gray streaks in her dark hair and a face lined with age. She wore a military uniform covered in symbols and medals. Behind her stood other humans of various ages, all watching the Concordat soldiers with expressions that seemed almost sad. "I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka," the gray-haired female said, "of the Terran remnant." Boren found his voice. "They, the humans. You are real. The stories were real." Tanaka smiled, but there was no joy in it. Only old pain. "We are real," she said, "and we apologize for our lateness. It took time to wake up. 3,000 years of cold sleep does not end quickly. 3,000 years. Yes." Tanaka looked at the Concordat soldiers, at their weapons pointed at her chest. She did not seem afraid. "We have been sleeping since your ancestors drove us out. waiting for the day we would be needed again. Or forgiven. She paused. It seems necessity came before forgiveness. But we are here now, and we will not abandon you to the darkness. Not this time. Boren lowered his weapon. His soldiers followed. Why, he asked. Our ancestors hurt you. The histories say many things. Tanaka stepped forward and placed her small hand on Boren's scaled arm. Her touch was warm. We will have time for history later. For now, we have a war to win. Together. Behind her, the stars were clear for the first time in months. The swarm was not gone, but it was no longer unstoppable. Lyra had never felt so small. She stood in a corridor of the human flagship Perseverance, and everything around her was built for beings half her height. The ceilings were low, the doorways narrow, the furniture delicate. Yet somehow, this ship had survived 3,000 years in the coldest reaches of space. Admiral Tanaka walked beside her, moving with the slow patience of someone who had all the time in the universe. The Concordat Council had chosen Lyra as their cultural liaison, partly because of her knowledge of the ancient texts, and partly because no one else had volunteered. The humans still frightened most people. You seem nervous, Tanaka observed. Your ship is not what I expected, Lyra admitted. The stories described human vessels as war machines, cold metal and weapons. Tanaka smiled. Would you like to see what we actually brought to war? She led Lyra through a doorway into a space that made Lyra stop breathing. It was a garden. A living, growing garden in the heart of a warship. Trees stretched toward artificial sunlight. Flowers bloomed in colors Lyra had never seen. Water flowed through gentle streams, and the air smelled like rain and growing things. We brought our home with us, Tanaka said. When we left, we knew we might never return. So we carried pieces of earth wherever we went. Lyra touched a flower petal. It was real, soft and alive. This is beautiful. They walked deeper into the ship. Lyra saw an art gallery filled with paintings and sculptures. She saw a library with actual paper books. And then she saw something that made her heart crack in her chest. A nursery. Filled with human children. They were playing with holographic creatures, laughing and chasing shapes of light. Lyra recognized some of the holograms. Salifians, Thracians, Makari. The children were playing with images of the species that had driven their ancestors away. You brought children, Lyra whispered, to a war zone. We brought our future, Tanaka corrected. Humans do not abandon their young. Ever. Not even for safety. We would rather die together than live apart. One of the children noticed Lyra, a small girl with dark hair and curious eyes. She ran over and looked up at Lyra's 4 arms with wonder. Are you a Salifian? The child asked. You look just like the stories. Lyra knelt down to the child's level. Yes, I am Salifian. What stories? Mommy says Salifians are the wisest people in the galaxy. She says they keep all the history so nobody forgets. The girl grinned. I want to be a keeper of history someday. Just like you. Lyra could not speak. She looked at Tanaka, who watched with an expression of deep sadness. We taught our children about you, Tanaka said. All of you. The species we once called friends. We told them stories of your kindness, your wisdom, your courage. We wanted them to love you, even though we were gone. What? Lyra stood, her legs unsteady. We drove you out. The purge. I have read the records. Your people were hunted, killed, and you taught your children to love us. Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. Then she gestured for Lyra to follow. They walked to a different part of the ship. A hall of names, etched into dark metal. Thousands of names. Tens of thousands. Each one with a date and a small symbol beside it. These are the ones who died during the purge, Tanaka said. Humans killed by the people they considered family. They died confused and heartbroken, not understanding what they had done wrong. She touched one name. Her fingers trembled. Yuki Tanaka I, she read. My grandmother. She was a teacher on a Salifian colony. When the purge came, she refused to leave her students behind. She said they were her children, same as any human. The colony militia killed her for it. Lyra felt tears running down her blue cheeks. Admiral, I do not know what to say. My grandmother's last message was recorded. Tanaka pressed a button on the wall. An old voice filled the hall, speaking in the ancient human tongue. Lyra's translator rendered the words. They are afraid. Fear makes people do terrible things. But fear fades. Love does not. Someday, they will call us back. And we must answer. Promise me, my little star. Promise me you will answer. Tanaka wiped her eyes. I made that promise when I was 7 years old. I have carried it for 92 years. And when the call finally came, I woke up, gathered my fleet, and I answered. Lyra fell to her knees. How? How can you forgive us? How can you fight for us after everything? Tanaka knelt beside her. This small, fragile human, who had slept for 3,000 years and crossed the galaxy to save the descendants of those who murdered her family. Because, Tanaka said softly, if we had become the monsters you feared, then you would have been right to drive us out. And my grandmother would have died for nothing. She took Lyra's hand in her own. We choose who we are, Lyra. Every day, we chose forgiveness. We chose hope. And now, we choose to fight beside you. In the nursery behind them, the children laughed and played with holographic aliens, learning to love the stars again. Fun had never wanted to be brave. The Makari were small, six-limbed creatures built for thinking and healing, not fighting. Their homeworld had no predators, no wars, no violence. When Finn became a combat medic, their family had wept with confusion. Why would anyone choose to see such terrible things? Now, surrounded by wounded soldiers in a field hospital, Finn understood their family's tears. The swarm had attacked 3 colonies in the past week. Finn had treated hundreds of patients, worked until their 6 hands cramped and bled, and still more kept coming. Bodies broken, minds shattered, lives ending in Funn's arms with questions on their lips that had no answers. And yet, the War Council had decided to send soldiers into the heart of a swarm hive ship. Suicide, the Concordat generals had called it. Absolute madness. But the humans had volunteered anyway. Finn stood in the shuttle bay, assigned to accompany the human strike team as a medical advisor. Their knowledge of swarm biology had made them useful. Their size made them expendable. No one had said that part out loud, but Finn understood. Colonel Diego Silva approached. He was a tall human with dark skin and kind eyes, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had walked into death before and walked out again. You must be Fun, he said. The little doctor. I am not little, Fun replied, though the words sounded weak even to themselves. I am average height for my species. Silva laughed. It was a warm sound, unexpected in such a grim place. Fair enough. Average height doctor, then. Stay close to my team. We will keep you safe. I am supposed to keep you safe, Finn said. That is why I am here. Then we will keep each other safe. Silva placed a gentle hand on Funn's head, between their antennae. That is how humans do things. The shuttle ride to the hive ship was the longest hour of Funn's life. The human soldiers checked their weapons and told jokes Finn did not understand. They seemed almost relaxed, as if they were going to a celebration instead of their deaths. Then the doors opened, and Finn understood true fear. The inside of a hive ship was a living nightmare. Walls of organic matter pulsed like breathing flesh. The air was thick with spores and poison. Swarm drones moved through the corridors like ghosts, hunting for anything that did not belong. The humans moved with silent precision, cutting through obstacles and avoiding detection when possible. Finn struggled to keep up, their small legs burning with effort. Then everything went wrong. An explosion separated Fun from the group. They fell through a membrane into a lower level, alone in the dark. The sounds of fighting echoed from above, but Finn could not find a way back. They were lost. They were going to die here, alone, in the belly of a monster. Fun, can you hear me? A voice in their communicator. A human voice. One of Silva's soldiers, a young woman named Rosa. I am here, Fun whispered. I am lost. I cannot find the team. Stay calm. I am coming to get you. No, you cannot leave the mission for me. I am not important enough. Rosa's response was sharp. Do not ever say that again. Stay where you are. I am coming. She found Finn 20 minutes later, crawling through a tunnel filled with acid that burned through her suit. Her arms were blistered, her breathing heavy. But she smiled when she saw Fun. There you are, she said. Let us get out of here. The journey back was worse than the journey in. Rosa carried Fun when they could not keep up. She fought through swarm drones with nothing but a knife when her rifle jammed. She took wounds that should have stopped her and kept moving anyway. Finally, they reached the team. The disruption devices were planted, but the extraction point was overrun. Colonel Silva looked at his soldiers, then at Fun. Something passed between the humans, a silent understanding that Finn did not grasp. The little one makes it out, Silva said. That is an order. The humans formed a circle around Fun, weapons facing outward. The swarm came at them in waves, endless and hungry. One by one, the humans fell. They did not scream. They did not beg. They simply fought until they could not fight anymore, always making sure Fun stayed protected. Rosa was one of the last. A swarm drone tore through her stomach, and she collapsed beside Fun. Even dying, she managed to smile. Told you I would get you out, she whispered. Rescue arrived moments later. Concordat ships broke through, pulling Fun and the few surviving humans to safety. The disruption devices worked. The hive ship died, but 11 humans died with it. Later, on the medical ship, Fun found Colonel Silva. He had survived, barely. Half his body was wrapped in bandages. What? Fun demanded. Why did they die for me? I am nobody. I am not even a warrior. Silva looked at Fun with those kind eyes. You were scared, he said. And you came anyway. You were hurt, and you kept going. That makes you one of us. He reached out and touched Fun's head again, between the antennae. Humans do not measure worth by strength. We measure it by heart. And yours, little doctor, is bigger than most. Fun said nothing. But for the first time in months, they did not feel small. Elder Oswin had spent his entire life believing he was wise. He had studied the ancient texts, memorized the histories, and taught 3 generations of archivists how to separate truth from legend. He had been certain that humans were a myth, a story invented by the precursors to teach moral lessons. He had been wrong about everything. Now he stood at the observation deck of the Grand Archive, watching the battle unfold in the skies above Salith. The swarm had adapted. It had studied the humans and learned their tactics. Now it ignored the Concordat ships entirely, focusing all its fury on the small fleet that had come to save them. The human flagship Perseverance was surrounded. Its shields were failing. Admiral Tanaka's voice came through the emergency broadcasts, calm even as her ship burned around her. All human vessels, maintain formation. Protect the civilian transports. Do not let them reach the colonies. Oswin watched the human ships take hit after hit. They could have retreated. They could have saved themselves. Instead, they formed a wall between the swarm and the Concordat worlds, dying by the hundreds to buy time for people who had once driven them away. Ancestors, forgive us, Oswin whispered. What have we done? He turned from the window and ran to the forbidden section of the archive. If there was anything that could help, anything at all, it would be here. In the texts he had dismissed as fairy tales his entire life, he searched for hours, throwing aside scrolls and data crystals. His old hands ached. His eyes blurred with tears and exhaustion. But he kept looking, because somewhere in this mountain of forgotten knowledge was the truth. And then he found it, a sealed record, hidden behind false walls, protected by codes that should have been impossible to break. But Oswin was the greatest scholar on Salith, and desperation made him greater still. The record opened, and Oswin read the truth about the Purge. The humans had not been banished because they were dangerous. They had been banished because they were generous. 3,000 years ago, humans had shared everything with the young species of the Concordat. Technology that took other civilizations millennia to develop. Medicine that cured diseases thought incurable. Art and music and stories that made life beautiful. They asked for nothing in return. They simply gave, because giving made them happy, and the ancient leaders had grown afraid, not of human violence, of human kindness. They feared becoming dependent. They feared being overshadowed by a species that seemed to have no limits on what it would sacrifice for others. They feared that their own people would love the humans more than their own kind. So they invented the monster narrative. They rewrote history. They painted the humans as dangerous, unpredictable, violent. And then they drove them out, killing any who refused to leave. The purge was not defense. It was jealousy. It was fear of being loved less. Oswin wept as he read the final entries. Recordings of human parents begging for their children. Footage of human teachers dying to protect alien students. Messages from human leaders pleading for understanding, promising to leave peacefully if only the killing would stop. And through it all, the ancient Concordat leaders had watched and done nothing, because it was easier to destroy love than to deserve it. Oswin gathered the records. All of them. Every piece of evidence he could carry. Then he walked to the broadcast center of the Grand Archive and pushed aside the technicians who tried to stop him. This is Elder Oswin of the Grand Archive, he said, his voice carrying across every channel in the Concordat. I have lied to you. We have all lied to you. For 3,000 years, we have told ourselves that the humans were monsters, that we drove them out to protect ourselves. But I have found the truth, and you deserve to hear it. He showed them. All of it. The records, the footage, the pleading messages. He showed them what their ancestors had done to the species now dying to save them. When he finished, the communications channels were silent. Then, slowly, the silence filled with voices. My grandfather kept a human toy. He said a human child gave it to him before they were taken away. My family has a song. We did not know where it came from, but the records show it was a human lullaby. They built our hospitals, our schools. They asked for nothing, and we murdered them. The voices grew louder, angry, ashamed, and then something else, determined. Across the Concordat, civilian ships began launching. Freighters, transports, private vessels armed with mining lasers and homemade weapons. Species that had not cooperated in centuries flew together, all heading toward the same destination, the human fleet. Oswin watched them go, tears streaming down his old blue face. He opened a channel to the Perseverance. Admiral Tanaka, he said, you are not alone. You were never alone. We remember what you truly were, and we are coming to stand beside you. On the bridge of her dying ship, Admiral Tanaka smiled through her own tears. About time, she whispered. About damn time. The combined fleet struck the swarm from behind, catching it between two forces. The battle turned. The swarm, unable to adapt to enemies who no longer fought alone, began to fall apart. For the first time in 3,000 years, humans and Concordat fought as one dot, and this time, they won. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Salith. The Devourer swarm had retreated to the outer reaches of the galaxy, wounded and weakened. They would return someday, everyone knew that. But for now, the stars were quiet. The Concordat Council Chamber was full for the first time in decades. Representatives from every species had gathered to debate the most important question any of them had ever faced: what to do with the humans. They should return to the void regions, argued one delegate, a Kalani with traditional markings on his scales. They serve their purpose. The war is over. We do not need them anymore. They are still dangerous, added another. The records Elder Oswin revealed proved that our ancestors feared them. Perhaps they had reason. Your ancestors feared their own shadows, Commander Boren growled. The Thrashin had changed much in the past year. He no longer trusted old stories. I watched the humans fight. I watched them die. They bled for us. What more proof do you need? Finn stood next, the small Makari now serving as ambassador for their people. I was inside a hive ship when everything went wrong. 11 humans died to save me. Not for politics. Not for advantage. For me. A nobody from a species of healers. They paused. If that is dangerous, then I wish more species were so dangerous. Lyra was the last to speak. She walked to the center of the chamber, her 4 hands trembling. I have spent my life studying myths, she said. Stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the universe. The humans were supposed to be the greatest myth of all. Impossibly kind. Impossibly fierce. Beings who would burn worlds to save a single child, and then weep over what they had done. She looked at the delegates, one by one. They are not a myth. They are real, and they are better than any story we ever told about them. She told them about the garden on the Perseverance, about the children playing with holographic Salithians, about Admiral Tanaka's grandmother, who died protecting alien students and asked her granddaughter to forgive her killers. They taught their children to love us, Lyra said. For 3,000 years, while we built statues celebrating the purge, they told stories about our kindness, about our wisdom. They never stopped believing we would call them back. The chamber was silent. The doors opened, and Admiral Tanaka walked in. She was not armed. She was not accompanied by guards. She was simply an old woman with gray hair and tired eyes, standing before a room full of people who were deciding her fate. We do not need your answer today, she said. Her voice was gentle. We waited 3,000 years. We can wait longer. She turned to leave. Admiral, Lyra called. Where will you go? Tanaka stopped. For a moment, she seemed unsure how to answer. Then she smiled, and Lyra saw something in that smile she had never seen before. Hope. Home, Tanaka said. To Earth. We left it behind when we thought we would never return. We put it to sleep, just like ourselves, hoping someday we would see it again. She touched the wall of the chamber, her fingers tracing patterns in the stone. It is time to see what remains. The human fleet departed 1 week later. Lyra was aboard, granted special permission to witness something no alien had seen in 3,000 years. The journey took months. The human ships traveled slowly, reverently, as if afraid of what they would find. Children pressed against viewports, asking their parents questions that had no answers. Will it be green? Will there be animals? Will it remember us? When Earth finally appeared on the screens, the entire ship went silent that it was green. Wildly, impossibly green. Forests covered the continents. Rivers sparkled under an unfamiliar sun. The cities were gone, swallowed by time and nature, but the planet itself was alive, thriving, waiting. Admiral Tanaka was the first to set foot on the surface. She was 73 years old, and she had dreamed of this moment since she was 7. She knelt in the grass, picked up a handful of dark soil, and held it to her chest. "We dreamed of this," she whispered. "Every night in the cold dark. We dreamed of coming home." Around her, humans emerged from their ships. Some walked slowly, touching trees and flowers like they were precious things. Others ran, laughing, throwing themselves into rivers and rolling in meadows. Many simply stood and cried, overwhelmed by a planet they had only known through stories. That a small girl approached Lyra. She was the same child from the nursery, the one who wanted to be a keeper of history. "Will you stay?" the girl asked. "Will you be our friend this time?" Lyra knelt to the child's level. Behind her, she could see Concordat ships entering the atmosphere. Not warships, transport vessels, carrying supplies and volunteers and diplomats, carrying people who wanted to help rebuild. "Yes," Lyra said. "This time we stay." The girl smiled and took Lyra's hand. Together, they walked toward the other children, human and alien, already playing in the meadow. The myth was over. The humans were home. And this time, the galaxy would not let them go. Above them, the stars watched. No longer cold, no longer distant, just waiting to see what this new family would become. It would take generations to find out. But for the first time in 3,000 years, everyone had time, and no one was sleeping anymore.